And finally, we get to the meat of the topic that you're probably most interested in, managing security within the Redshift instance with regards to users, groups, tables, and schema. We'll use examples a little more heavily here than previously, simply because this is the area where you're probably most likely going to have to get the most hands-on. Now, these examples will return us to the data warehouse that we've been building, using the existing breakdown of users and groups that we have here at Abacus Widgets. If you have a background in Postgres or any other RDBMS like SQL Server, this area should be pretty familiar, but there are some quirks unique to Redshift to be sure. Rest assured, Redshift, like any other SQL engine, basically comes down to managing users and the individual grant or revoke of privileges that each can have on an individual object. Now, in many ways, Redshift simplifies this concept over most other engines. Some have various levels of roles, including delegated roles and separation of principals between instances and databases. Redshift has one type of principal, a user, and then a way to organize user into areas of like privileges, groups. Meanwhile, you have objects such as tables and functions and views, and then a way to organize the objects, namely schema. Granting privileges gives users rights to objects, or better put, rights to perform activities on objects, things like select from, update, delete. Now, granting of this privilege can be done directly or through the group that they are a member of, which is a very good idea because it eases management greatly. Now, users, by default, have no privileges to do anything, not even simply select from a simple table object, unless they have been granted that privilege. The only exception to any of this is that there is a concept of a super user, which is just a user, but it's a user that can basically do anything. This would be the equivalent of a SQL Server SA, or a sysadmin. And this is the only user that can initially create objects, groups, and schema, so it is necessary to maintain a user or two for these tasks in this job, but the number of super users should be absolutely as limited as possible. Don't get lazy on me and just start giving super user to everybody. Now, here at Abacus, other than the two of us that are building the data warehouse, we are the super users. The other major users of our data warehouse will be the finance department, the sales department, and then the data warehouse developers. Now, the needs of each of these teams vary, but we maintain the same set of privileges for each group for ease of maintenance. So let's go through setting them up individually, and I think by the end you'll have a good foundational understanding for how this all works. Now, the members of the finance team are Jeff Handy, Jill Clever, and Kim Mathy. They also have a user account that they use for some of their tools that we'll set up for an application login. That user we'll just call Finance App. We'll create each of these users and then add them all to a group called Finance. And we can do that with this standard SQL syntax. Create user Jeff Handy with password, change later. Then we'll do the same for Jill Clever, Kim Mathy, and then finally the Finance App. Now, because this is a login associated with an application, we're definitely going to want to give this a good solid password that can't be easily guessed or even easily remembered. And now we'll create group finance. Adding each of the users to this group is accomplished like this. Alter group finance, and then add user Jeff Handy. Do it again for Jill and Kim, and then the Finance App. So these users exist, and they are grouped into a team, but currently have no rights or privileges anywhere in the data warehouse. But having them grouped into a finance group now makes that part easy. We can go about granting rights and privileges like this. First, we'll grant select on the dim product table, and we'll give that to the group finance. And just like that, all members of the group finance can now select from the dim product table. And we'll do the same for fact sales. Now, if we want to assign privileges individually, we can still do that. For example, even though the Finance App is a member of the finance group and will have all the same rights that any other member of the group would have, there might be additional privileges that we want to give to that login. For example, maybe they need to do some minor maintenance occasionally on tables through a front end. So we would grant update on table fact sales to Finance App. Now, this is a grant that exists outside of that group. It should be fairly clear why setting up teams and delegation of rights makes sense to do at a group level. with many users and then many objects and then many types of privileges that you can assign between them, the management would quickly grow into an exponentially demanding list of assignments.